The first question most people ask you when they meet you is, where are you from? Well, for me, that's a very complicated answer. So rather than saying the whole story at once, I thought I'd share it with you piece by piece. I was born in October, a cold October morning in 1960 at the Bluff Hospital in Yokohama, Japan. My parents had gotten into the car, my mother in labor, and started the journey to the hospital when they had a car accident. Of course, my mother was not thrilled. And my father, being the rather impulsive person that he was probably rather angry about the whole situation. And anyway, the police came and they took them down to the office. And the police said, we're in a very big hurry. You should just go. You just go. And of course, my mother was in agreement with that, but my father said, no, I'm not leaving until we've settled this accident thing. Then after we settle this accident thing, we can go to the hospital and have the baby. Well, you can imagine the stressful situation that put my mother in. She was both translating and in labor because my father didn't speak Japanese, or not much anyway. Needless to say, the police quickly finished their report and sent my parents on their way. Well, 18 hours after arriving at the hospital, I was born. Now let me tell you a little bit about my parents. My mother was Patricia Mary Finrell Clark. She was born in Walla Walla, Washington. My father, William Emmer Clark, was born in Salida, Colorado. My mother was raised mostly in Seattle, although when she became 16, she decided, she gave her heart to the Lord and decided that she wanted to go to camp, which is where she began to develop her relationship with the Lord. And then also she heard about a Bible college that was called Simpson Bible College in Seattle, so she went there. And then when she was there, she heard about another Bible college in Canada called Prairie Bible College. And the story was that at Prairie, when you got done with Prairie, you knew your Bible, which was very true because that woman, of course, my parents met and married, and then together decided to go back to Japan as missionaries. And so they went back and began to work in different capacities. My dad loved the idea of camping, and one of the things they had done on their honeymoon was to go visit a camp in Canada that was quite a fantastic camp, and they decided that they wanted to build a camp in Japan. And so they started that process of looking for land as they were doing other jobs. But that dream of making a camp never was realized in Japan. My parents had 3 children in Japan. My brother was the oldest, Bill. I'm the second. And then my youngest brother, Chris. About 6 months after I was born, I disappeared. And my parents had no idea where I was. And of course, they were worried. So in Japan at that time, they had microphones set up all over the cities. And so their way of communicating or getting information out was to send out a communication saying, you know, a little white Caucasian child is missing and we don't know where she is and where can we find this little girl. And eventually a man came with me in his arms and he said, I found her being drugged by a dog. And of course my parents were frightened, and they grabbed me and took me home and took care of me. I neglected to tell you, one of the most difficult parts after my birth was that I had colic and I cried for 6 months. And for my parents, it was a very, very difficult time. And I suppose as a baby, it wasn't a honeymoon either. But finally, a doctor said to my mother, mix up some graham crackers, grind up apples and honey, and feed that to her. And that should take care of her stomach problems. And sure enough, it did. So my mother would always tell people that that's the best thing for colic. Now, whether it was or not, I don't know, but it sure cured me. It had, one of the things my mother had noticed that she thought was perhaps the cause of it was that my uncle had given her a case of milk. And when she tasted, after feeding me milk for several weeks, she tasted it and she said, oh, this is terrible, it's rotten. Who knows whether it was rotten milk that she was feeding to me all along or just that particular can happened to be rotten. And so she, of course, stopped feeding me the rotten milk.